I'm gonna love you.
Hey guys, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. How's everyone doing today? Today I have a great game for you guys. It's with Vasily Smyslov versus Zoltan Ribli. Now Smyslov is a titan in the game. He's a extraordinary player. His specialty is the end game. So he's a lot like Magnus Carlsen is today, of today's players, where he'll take a position that looks very drawish and he'll turn that into a victory, into a win. So he was an in-game master and a former world champion, and he played for a very, very long time competitively. One of the longest tournament players that I can think of. This game here was played in 1983, and he was 62 years old. This is the Candidates Tournament in 1983, and Smyslov, believe it or not, was 62 years old. So he could play at the top level for a very, very long time. So let's go ahead and get into the game and see what transpired. Smyslov was white and Zoltan Ribli was black. Oh, and then before I get into the game, let me just say real fast, it was kind of interesting in going over the game and figuring out and finding out what happened in the previous round. The previous round, Smyslov was playing against Robert Hubner, the GM from Germany, and they were going back and forth, and they were tied, and no one could exert like a win. So the game was played at a casino, and since they were tied, no one could establish true dominance. They decided to decide the winner with a game of roulette down at the casino game area. And after the roulette wheel spun, Smyslov won. His number was the ball fell on his number, so he wound up advancing to the next round of the Candidates Tournament by a game of roulette. So I thought that was kind of interesting to read about. So let's go ahead and get into the game. He played d4. He was an all-around player. Smyslov could play any opening. Knight f6, typical response. Knight f3, e6, c4, and d5. Now this here is like they kind of backdoored their way into a queen's gambit declined. Let's see if black would have played b6 instead, it would have been like a queen's Indian defense. But we have a queen's gambit declined here. Knight c3. c5, which is the Tarrasch defense. Now, the idea behind this opening here is to immediately attack white's center, and it's also to try to steal white's advantage of having the first move and having the initiative because of the first move. c5, attacking the center, he's trying to go ahead and basically steal all of white's mojo right from the beginning. C takes d, knight takes. The reason why Ribli played knight takes here is because black has less space in these type of openings. So he's hoping for a knight trade. That way his position won't be as cramped. But Smyslov played e3 here, which is a very calm and tame continuation to the game. More aggressive would have been e4, which is what Ribli was hoping for anyway. It would have been e4, knight takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, bishop b4 check, bishop blocks, queen takes, and at the end of this continuation here, it kind of looks like a Grunfeld defense without black's dark square bishop being fianchettoed on the king side. But if you look at the pawn structure, this is the pawn structure that you would get in a Grunfeld, with black having the 2-1 majority on the queen side. But this would be better for white though, because black doesn't have that menacing dark square bishop. But this wasn't played in the game though. Smyslov went for a more tame continuation. He went for e3 here. Now you have knight c6, which attacks the pawn on d4. Bishop d3, a developing move here. Bishop e7. This here is a developing move, and it also gives black the possibility of playing bishop f6. That way he will be able to put more pressure on that d4 square, accompanied with the pawn and the knight on the c file. Castles, castles. Now you have a3 here. Now a3 here stops those knights from jumping into that b4 square, because white's idea here is white would like to form some type of battery there with the light square bishop. He wants to play c2 and then attack that h7 square. Or he would even like to maybe play bishop c2 and then put his queen on d3 and then attack the h7 square. So the a3 move stops the knights from coming in there, which would mess up his plans of forming a battery. So now black can't stand the tension any longer. He takes on the center. C takes D. Now you have E takes D. And this gives white an isolated queen's pawn, better known as an isolani. He has control over the E5 square and the C5 square. These would be great squares to post knights on. Good outpost squares for knights. Bishop f6, going on with the plan that we had talked about before, attacking that D pawn. Now you have queen c2, which is a really good move. In the notes for this game, Yasser Sarawan commented that this move here, queen c2, was a novelty. It had never been played before. And again, it puts a lot of pressure on that h7 square. White is sacrificing that pawn on d4. He's saying, go ahead, take the pawn on d4. I'm going to focus on attacking your king side. And because of it, it makes black compromise his king side pieces. He's going to have to do something to avoid losing material on the king side. So he plays h6 in the game. Let's go back and see what would happen if he played different moves here. If he would have played g6 here, then you would have bishop h6. Rook moves out the way. Now you would have rook a d1, followed by the rook on f going to e1. So you would have white being able to develop his pieces to the best possible squares without any type of fight. So that would just be too easy for white. You can't just let your opponent just do whatever he wants in the game. So if he would have accepted the pawn sacrifice with knight takes pawn, then you would have knight takes, bishop takes. Now you would have bishop takes h7, check. King h8, and the bishop goes back to e4. Now white is better here in this position. Obviously, you can look at the position and see that black's king side is starting to be busted up. His king is exposed. It's on h8. There's no cover on the h7 pawn. You can look at the position here and tell from yourself that white is doing a lot better than black here. So let's go back to the position that was played in the game, which was h6 to avoid the bishop takes h7 capture. Now you have rook d1 supporting the indirectly supporting the pawn on d4. Queen b6. The idea behind that is to again hit that pawn on d4. It looks like all of black's pieces is aimed on that d4 pawn, and now that also gives black a chance to put his rook on d8 and again further pressure that d4 pawn. Bishop c4. Now you have rook d8 that was played in the game, putting more pressure on that d4 pawn. But if the knight would have taken that pawn on d4, then you would have knight takes, bishop takes, and then this incredible move here, knight a4, which hits the queen. So then the queen would have to leave the defense of the bishop on d4, and the rook would take. So then, in order to get the piece back, black would play b5. And then I just want to say this: a lot of times, players, let's go back one move. A lot of players would just calculate it up to this point right here, but this shows the power of deep calculation. Though you have to always push yourself to go one or two moves deeper than what you may originally think. So b5, which forks the bishop and the knight. Now you would have bishop takes h6. And this continuation is winning for white because next you would have the rook coming to the g4 square, and then black's going to have all types of problems on his king side with the queen hopping in. Now you have the bishop, the rook, and the queen hopping in. If black takes that bishop on h6, then his king side is going to be very, very exposed. So it's going to be a big problem there. So that would be a winning continuation for white. So Ribli did not take that pawn. He played rook d8 instead, so to indirectly threaten the pawn. He's got a lot of pieces on that d4 pawn. So the knight drops back to e2 here because Smyslov was thinking that black might want to swap off the knight on c3, and Smyslov wants to use that knight for an attack, an upcoming attack on the king side. So he moves the knight back to e2, and it also protects, adds protection to that d pawn. So that's a good move that serves dual purposes. Bishop d7, which is a developing move, and it allows his rook on the a square to come to the c file. Now you have queen e4. White is going ahead with his attacking plan. He wants to establish that battery along that b1 and h7 diagonal. Now you have knight e7, which is a really good defending move because that move there not only supports the knight on d5, but what it does more importantly, it's a defensive move. So in case the queen does go to h7, if the queen does come here to h7, then the knight will defend. So you have bishop d3. Bishop a4 was played in the game. Black's like, go ahead and go to h7. I don't care because my knight here is just going to go to g8 and defend everything and possibly even trap your queen. So black is trying to call white's bluff here. Bishop b5 was a better move according to Yasser Seirawan because bishop b5, and according to Smyslov after the game, he was saying that bishop b5 was a better move because then black could have equalized real fast by trading off the light square bishops. Like if he would have played queen h7 now, then the king moves over, the knight goes to g3, and now you have the bishop trade. Rook goes to the c8 file. So now you have the rook on the open c file, and you have the rook on the semi-open file that's hitting the isolated pawn. White doesn't have his bishop anymore attacking on that diagonal. And after putting this on the engine actually likes black here better. So not only would this have equalized, this would have just been flat out better for black if he would have played bishop to b5. But instead he played bishop to a4, which hits the rook there. Queen h7, king moves out the way, and now the idea is if he goes to king f8, then black would just block with knight g8. So his rook was under attack, white's rook was under attack, so he moved it to e1, which serves not to be the best move because he kind of pushed white into a more aggressive position. Now white's rook is on that semi-open e file, and where it could do more damage in the near future Now you have bishop b5. Now black wants to trade. He was like a move kind of late. Now he wants to trade his bishop and try to remove white's powerful d3 bishop there. So he trades. Bishop takes bishop because Smyslov felt like his knight is going to be a very powerful player in the attack to come. So if he felt like if he moved his bishop out the way to avoid capture, then Ribli would have just taken the knight to remove some pieces, and then that would have negatively affected Smyslov's attack coming up. So now you have queen takes. Now you have knight g3 with the idea of going to h5 and stirring up real trouble on black's king side. Knight g6. Is that queen trapped? I mean, I'd never like to have my queen in a position like this here with no escape route. The queen doesn't look very, it's behind enemy territories, as they like to say. Knight e5 here, which hits that knight that's blocking the queen in. Now you have the knight d to e7, which protects his knight. Now you have bishop takes h6. Boom. And the bishop cannot be recaptured either, because if the bishop is recaptured, now you have checkmate. Queen takes f7, checkmate. So the bishop is immune from being captured. So in the game, knight takes e5 was played, removing one of the attackers. And now it was a brilliant, brilliant move. It was a sack. Knight, he let him just capture his knight, and white played knight h5, which adds more heat to that g7 square, and it also threatens to take the bishop, because the bishop wouldn't be able to capture back because it's pinned by the bishop on a6. So now you have a really good move by Ribli. He plays knight f3 because he was going to lose a piece, right? He was going to give a piece back, but he decided to play knight f3. That way it would destroy white's king side pawn structure. So he's kind of returning the favor here. G takes f. Now you have knight f5 that was played in the game. If the queen would have taken the knight there on h5, that would be a mistake, because now you would have, you guys see it? Bishop takes g7, check. And now that beautiful queen there is undefended. White would just take the queen. Black would drop the queen, and that would be winning for white. So he can't do that. So he played knight f5 in the game. Now you have knight takes f6, knight takes h6, and d5. Really, really good move, d5. It does a lot of things. First off, it cuts white's queen off from getting over to the king side to help out. I mean, that's such a beautiful move. And then it just threatens to tear open black's cover there where his king is at. He doesn't have that many defensive pieces over there. It's hard to imagine that a little old pawn that's not even defended with another pawn can be so powerful in that position. So now you have queen takes b2. And the idea behind this is not necessarily to win the material on b2, but it's to try to give black a chance to get back to his king side and to get back on a good diagonal there, maybe have control over that the long dark square diagonal, since that d5 pawn push blocked the queen from getting over there. Now you have queen h8. The king goes to e7. Rook h6 was played in the game. Great move. But if the queen would have taken that knight, if the queen would have taken the pawn g7, now you would have queen takes f6. And this was actually the line that Ribli was planning for in his game when he was doing most of his calculations. He was thinking that white was just going to take on g7. Then you would have rook takes e6, check, queen takes, pawn takes, rook g8, pinning the queen, and this would be better for black. Black would win this game here. This is the line that Ribli was calculating for in the game. So he was surprised when all of a sudden white played rook takes e6, check, pawn takes, and now you have queen takes g. So with that move there, white was able to save his knight that was under attack and save his queen, which was under attack as well. All with that rook takes e6 move. Now you have knight f7 to block the check. Now you have d6, which is a real sneaky move here. Do you guys see the reason behind d6? Let me know in the comments if you spotted the reason behind d6. Okay, I'm going to continue. Now you have rook takes d6, and then this is the move. This is the reason why d6 was played for the discovery here. Knight to d5 check. Right, now you guys see what's going on here. The queen is hitting the queen there. Rook takes knight, now you have queen takes queen. So white here, if you just take a step back and reassess the position, white is materially and technically ahead here. He just has to trade some material and march on with his victory here. But it's easier said than done. The hardest thing to do is to win a technically won game sometimes. Now you have b6 because the pawn was under attack on b7. Queen b4 check. King f6. Now you have the rook. Now it's time for the rook to join the party and have some fun. Rook h8. That's to stop the queen from coming to h4 check. Now you have h4, which is a great restraining move. It stops the knight from coming in and the rook from coming into that g5 square. If you guys want to learn more about restraining and restrainment, check out Aaron Nimzo's book, My System. He has a whole chapter about restraint. Rook h to d8. Now you have rook e4 threatening rook f. Now you have rook e4 threatening rook f4. I love rook lifts. Knight d6. This is a mistake here because now this allows queen c3. And now no matter what black does next, he can win material. e5 is played. Now you just have rook eating the pawn. Rook takes e5. Rook takes e5. And f4 because the rook is pinned. Knight goes back to f7. F takes e5. And let's see here. If the king goes to e6 in the game, but if the knight takes, then that loses to f4 because the knight is pinned. So in the game, Ribli played king e6. Now you have queen c4, and Ribli just resigned right here because there's no way for him to continue on. But let's just see what would happen if he would have continued on. If he would have played e7, king e7, then you would have e6. And at this point, black cannot stop white's pawns on the king side, his f pawn and his h pawn. He can't stop those two pawns from promoting, accompanied with the e pawn on e6. So that would just be too much for him. Now, if he would have played rook d5 to block the check, now you would have f4. And then the continuation would be queen c6. And then it would be nothing. He would not be able to stop the loss of material here after queen c6 check. he would lose some material. And then he still has to deal with the pawns marching up with the same reason as before. You wouldn't be able to stop all these pawns from promoting these two. Alright, so Vasily Smyslov, he shocked the world again when he won this game because, again, he was 62 years old beating up on these young guys here. So it just shows that age is just a number. We've all heard that saying time and time again, and this proves it. Age is just a number. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.